with Dr. Trita Parsi, the professor at Georgetown University, author most recently of Losing an Enemy, Obama, Iran, and the Triumph of Diplomacy. His website, tritaparsi.com, and you can tweet him at tparsi. Dr. Parsi, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's always great talking with you. I always learn something from you. I'm curious your take on the current state. I mean, you know, we've the U.S. government is arguing that they've got video of an Iranian Army boat or Navy boat coming up to one of these tankers and removing a mine from the side of it. The owner of the tanker is saying, no, it wasn't a mine that hit us. We've got Seymour Hersh. I'm going to play that clip, after we talk, where Seymour Hersh was talking some time back about how he had reported for, I believe it was for the New York Times, that Dick Cheney in a meeting had suggested that the U.S. Army build a couple of these boats that look identical to these Iranian boats and use them to provoke an incident in the Gulf, to have a war with Iran. I mean, this is getting bizarre. What's solid? What isn't? What do we know? What do we not know?
We know extremely little, to be frank, because I think, frankly, that the so-called evidence that the administration has put out has actually confused people more because it's just so weak. I mean, these videos hardly show anything. First of all, we don't know if it's the Iranians. Secondly, removing a mine does not mean that they put the mine there. In fact, if they were there saving some of the sailors who were on that boat, which is something that crew members of the boat themselves have said, and they see that there's an unexploded mine on the boat, it is the responsible thing to remove it. And they may have done so precisely because they wanted to collect that evidence and see who actually did do this. So we don't know. And if the administration actually has any evidence, they should be putting it out in a way that actually is convincing, rather in a manner that only really strengthens the impression that the administration is willing to start a war with Iran regardless of what the facts are. I mean, coming out with a press conference within hours of this incident really signals this strong desire for escalation, because there's no way that by that time they would have already been able to have a strong assessment of what had happened. And I think another point that is very critical to understand in all of this is that Pompeo did not come out in the press conference and say that he had an intelligence finding. In fact, he didn't use the word evidence even once. What he said was that he had a government assessment. There's a significant difference between the two. An intelligence finding is actually based on facts. It comes with various degrees of confidence. It has some specific standards. A government assessment is essentially just his opinion. There's nothing more to it. There's no standards. There's no degrees of confidence or anything like that. But he used that word because I think he thinks and he knows that it carries more weight than it actually does have. It sounds more important and serious than it actually is. And I think that's a specific way of trying to deceive the American public.
Now, on 5 different occasions during the Obama presidency leading up to the 2020, as I recall, 2010 and 2012 elections, Donald Trump tweeted that any minute now Barack Obama, then president, is going to start a war with Iran in order to help Democrats or in order to help himself get reelected. Obviously, Trump thinks that a war with Iran is a good electoral strategy for a president facing reelection or whose party is facing reelection. And one of the press narratives is that you've got, Bolton and Pompeo, who are, Bolton in particular, enthusiastic about a war with Iran, and Trump, who is enthusiastic about talking about a war with Iran, but doesn't really want the responsibility of having an actual war with a real country that can fight back, that hasn't been weakened by years of sanctions and incompetent governance like Iraq was under Saddam Hussein or Afghanistan was under the Taliban, and that that dynamic is going to somehow keep us safe and keep Iran safe. I'm kind of skeptical of that media narrative. What are your thoughts on what might be going on in the White House and how we should be understanding this?
My own impression is that actually what Trump tweeted back then may have been his assessment then. I don't think it is his assessment right now. He knows quite well that he actually did carry a lot of states because of his strong anti-war sentiments and his message and being very critical of the Iraq war. That, however, is not the case for Bolton. Bolton clearly supported the war. He helped lure the American people into it. He continues to say that the Iraq war was a success. His track record of wanting war with Iran is impeccable. It is more than 2 decades long. I think what is happening is that Trump wants to get to the negotiations. He doesn't know how. The Israelis, the Saudis, Bolton have presented him with a path that is based on maximum pressure. It sounds good on paper. They've convinced Trump that that is the way to go, but they themselves know that this is a strategy that will fail to secure negotiations, but rather will drive the United States into a corner in which Trump's only way out may end up being military action, because that is their objective.
Now, Iran says that they're going to, in the next 4 days, going to be exceeding the uranium concentration, or whatever the proper word is, threshold that was set in the Iran deal, in this multi-nation agreement that Donald Trump pulled us out of. What does that mean? I mean, are they saying that they're going to go up to that point and stop, or are they saying that they're just going to break through and the deal is falling apart? And how are the Europeans responding? Are they attempting to, for example, break through some of the sanctions? Where are we at on that?
So the Iranians are saying that they're now going to start breaching some of the limits that the deal imposed on them. This is more than a year after the U.S. walked out of the deal, more than 2 years after the U.S. has undermined any sanctions relief and actually reimposed the sanctions. What they are doing, though, is very easily reversible. And they've already signaled that if the Europeans start living up to their obligations under the deal, which means that they have to start trading with Iran as they were before Trump reimposed the sanctions, then they will then reverse these measures and go back into full compliance. I think it indicates that they actually do want to be in compliance, but they are absolutely sick and tired of being the only country that actually is adhering to the deal. Because as much as the Europeans are speaking very positively and sending strong political signals about how important the deal is, they are not abiding by the deal. They are abiding by Trump's sanctions. They have stopped all purchases of Iranian oil. They have stopped a lot of airlines from Iran to land in Europe. All of financial transactions with Iran essentially have been stopped. They are not adhering to the nuclear deal. They're adhering to Trump's sanctions, the very same sanctions that they object to and believe are illegal. Nevertheless, they're adhering to it. And the Iranians are now essentially saying, well, there's going to be a cost for you if you don't live up to the nuclear deal, but live up to Trump's extortions. I hope this doesn't go too far, because I think it would be a very, very bad thing if the deal collapses altogether. But what the Iranians are doing was completely predictable. The Europeans frankly believe that the Iranians would do this sooner. I think we've all been lucky that the Iranians haven't done this thus far.
Now, for some time, it's been fairly apparent that the hard right in Israel, Netanyahu in particular, and the hard right in Saudi Arabia, which is basically all of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, have wanted Iran to be in a war. By and large, they have wanted Iran to be in a war with the United States. Not them, but Saudi. Correct me if my memory is incorrect, but I believe Israel has struck Iranian nuclear facilities in the past. It was more than a decade ago. If Iran was to exceed the threshold of the deal, and if, for example, Israel or Saudi Arabia were to do some small take out a nuclear facility in Iran, where could that lead? And if this becomes something that resembles the beginning of a hot war, what are the possibilities in your mind that the United States and Russia being Iran's ally, the U.S. being the ally of Saudi Arabia and Israel in the region, might end up in either a proxy war or an all-out war? And we have about a minute and a half here before we hit a hard break.
The risk for a big war is very significant. The idea that there could be a small attack and that it would be contained and that the Iranians would not retaliate is very, very unlikely. But if you want to sell a big war in these circumstances, you will try to market it as a small war. That's the only chance you have in actually being able to get it. And the scenario that you pointed out, that the Israelis would take military action as they did against Iraq back in the early 1980s, would most likely lead to a wider war. And this is a big worry that the Obama administration had, because it would mean that the United States would get dragged into a war at a time of its that was not of its choosing, that it would be a time of Israel's choosing. And as bad as a war is, it's even worse if actually the timing of it is chosen by another country that does not communicate with the United States on these type of decisions. So this is a very, very serious and dangerous situation, and I think particularly mindful of the track record of Bolton lying to the American public and fabricating evidence, the track record of the Trump administration's contentious relationship with the truth, the track record of the Israelis and the Saudis trying to push the United States into a war. We have to be extra cautious when it comes to any type of statements or evidence put forward by any side, including the Iranians here, because this is literally a matter of war and peace.